Have you ever received feedback at work that you just didn't know what to do with it?
Today, what we'll cover is how you can handle those situations, both from a mindset perspective, but also how you might communicate them. And we'll also talk about how you can give feedback if you need to give it upwards or sidewards so that you can share your side too. So, well, what might certain situations be, or maybe examples of feedback that we might get that's quite hard to take on or that might not land with us very well?
Yeah, I think there's different scenarios. So one might be that you work in a business where you only get one annual appraisal and some feedback's given over something you did 10 months ago. And it's hard to remember that in the moment. And it's a bit like, really? And it that often can feel like, well, you must be dragging something up because you've got to find something, and we tend not to react so well. Or it could be something that is harshly delivered in the moment just because of what's going on in the situation. And it's maybe not meant that way, but it's how it comes across. And it's very easy for us to become defensive and then hard to receive the feedback and respond to it in the right way.
It really made me think of transactional analysis, which is quite an old psychological model now, but it's the parent-child-adult dynamic. That when a parent, might be critical, which usually means they say things like "you did," "you didn't," "you are," "you aren't," "you should," "you shouldn't," that kind of language, or if maybe it's delivered harshly. As adults, we still do this. We respond often naturally in the way that we did as a child.
Absolutely.
So we'll either go rebellious, which is the defensive, and blame other people or push back or get angry, or we become submissive and we just accept it. And then we think later, well, no, but I didn't actually do that. But we don't speak up.
Yeah.
So part of it from a mindset perspective is catching that might be happening and try to move yourself into that adult state
Yeah.
of they might not be delivering it well, but there might be truth in this. And then we can obviously discuss different strategies on how to handle that. What would you say is your top strategy for handling that if you notice yourself start to feel defensive?
So this all comes down to self-awareness. And as part of everything that, I've taught as a mindset coach, that was taught to me and I teach to my clients, it's all about self-awareness and being able to catch yourself in the moment, to be able to recognize that I haven't reacted to that very well. I need to just stop a minute. Before that runaway train leaves the station and your mind's gone down a path that's probably completely untrue. So to be able to stop and go, right, okay, hold on a second. One is that feedback actually valid? Is there any truth in it? Because we know. And if there is, how can I respond to this in the right way? And actually, even if I don't think there is any, it's not valid, how can I respond in the right way? And sometimes that's about saying, thank you for that feedback. I need a little bit of time to process this. Would you mind if I just took a bit of time and I'll come back to you? Because when we take that deep breath and we put a bit of space, it neutralizes the tension and it enables us to get our brain into a state where we can actually go away and think about it more objectively. Whereas when we react in the moment, often things are said that we wish we hadn't said, or we get really upset, we go running to everybody, and he said this and she said that, and then you get everybody else's input, which is actually not always helpful. Doesn't mean that we don't sometimes want to go and get outside help, but when we do it from a place of, okay, this has happened and I'd like to know what someone else's perspective is on this, and it's done in a very calm and rational way, that can be helpful. But it's always about taking that step back. And then I think it's about being able to say, thank you for the feedback, I've taken that on board. I'd like to just explore this with you a bit further, to look at it from different perspectives and to understand how maybe we could make sure this doesn't happen again, or that I can improve. So when we come from a growth mindset of, this is not just about my boss or the business, this is about how do I grow as a person, we take it as a learning opportunity rather than a criticism or a judgment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think you've got a great example that you told me about recently.
Yeah. So before I go into that, I think from what you've said, it's about the wider way that you see the world rather than just how do you see that one interaction or that one bit of feedback. In that, if I am a person that, and we've all known people like this that seem to be incapable of it, acknowledging that I could be wrong, if I struggle with that, then I'm not going to think maybe there's validity here. Let me explore that. Because the reality is, from anything in any relationship, there's probably valid points on both sides that need to be explored. It's not just that the boss is right or that you're right. It's that probably there's, yeah, that's maybe fair. I could do that bit. There's this that hasn't been considered from my side. And you come to that kind of middle ground. So a good example, I was talking to a client the other day, and she was saying that she'd received some negative feedback from her boss's boss, that in the absence of her boss, that had told her something to do with she should have done something a particular way and he didn't understand why she'd done it that way instead. And she handled it really, really well. So she said, I absolutely agree with you. Handling it that way would have been much better. And I get from your perspective that you're looking at this and you don't see why that's happened. So there was I'm going to validate this side first and I'm going to see the value in what he's saying here.
Yeah.
And then she said, moving forwards, I want to make sure that I do it more effectively and more efficiently next time. What I will need from you to make this easier for me is if I can get a bit more of a breakdown on this part, this software, as to exactly what you're looking for, it would make it easier for me to follow the process in a better way.
Nice.
What was great there is that she gave validity to both sides. It wasn't, I'm defending myself, well, you didn't give me this. Well, I didn't have the right instructions.
Yeah.
It was a, fair enough, this is what I need for next time. I take responsibility on my side. I also want you to take a bit of responsibility. What was even better about that is this guy is particularly red, for those that might know what I'm talking about, the personality types. Quite direct, quite dominant, could be seen as intimidating or rude. Depends how you see the world. And a couple of weeks later, he said to her that he was quite impressed with how she dealt with that feedback. She took it on the chin, which made him have a bit more respect for her because she didn't react, typically.
And do you think that meant that he then responded better in saying, okay, we'll give you what you need next time. We will do our part to make sure this is better. Did he do that?
Yeah, so I did. That's a good point, because I did say to her, well, has he taken on your feedback? And she said, actually, yes. The next project, he's not somebody that likes to go into the detail and list things out, but he did. And he did that because she said, in order for me to hit what you want, this is what I need from you. Now, what's great about that is that if she'd have responded with the same point, but not in the same way, of, but I only did that because you didn't give me clear instructions, especially being the type of guy he is, he would have responded the same way with maybe more aggression and more blaming.
Yeah.
And it just would have escalated. If she'd have responded with submission of, yeah, okay, I'll do it better next time, without being clear on what she needs to help, she may well have made the same mistake, angered him further, and he may well have perceived that dynamic as reinforcing that he's the hierarchy.
Yeah, he was right and she was wrong.
Yeah, as opposed to respecting her a little bit more, him actually leaning more to what she needs, and her being able to do a better job as well. Everybody won in that situation.
Yeah, win-win all round there. I like that story.
Yeah, and that's a good example, I think, of how to communicate it. But it always comes back to, if what you're thinking mindset-wise is, well, that's not my fault and that's not fair and you can't tell me that and you didn't do this and screw you, and then you're trying to say, yeah, I get your point, what I need from you is, it's not going to come out very well, even if you're trying to tick the communication box. It always goes back to mindset.
Yeah. Totally agree. I mean, it's everything in life, isn't it? Really, it's all about what our mindset is, and our openness to different perspectives influences the way that we communicate. That influences the outcomes that we get. It's always about that.
So considering mindset is your bag, what, and I think it's probably a fixed growth thing, what do you think are the types of mindset that might trigger more of that rebellious child, that defensiveness that people might want to look out for? And how can they cultivate more of a growth mindset to actually feel better when they get feedback, even if it's delivered badly?
So a lot of it comes down to, there's so much that goes into this. We could be here for a week, really, but I think a lot of it comes down to our level of confidence, and to be able to step out of the emotion of the situation and how we feel, because like you say, it's that emotional child in that moment, and to be able to say, okay, how could I look at this if I was looking at it from the outside? If I was a third party here, what would I be looking at? That's a tool, an NLP tool. What does a third party view look like? And you could go and get a third party view, but you don't have to. So you can step out of the situation yourself and look at it from the outside and go, okay, what would a third party see if they were looking at this? And I think that's a really valuable mindset tool to be able to cultivate. And that awareness, like we said, of being able to catch yourself quickly, to go, hang on a minute, I'm just going down a rabbit hole and I'm going to stop. Because actually, what we all want is to feel better. We want to feel good. And by perpetuating that, how dare they, and he said this, and he judged me, and that's not right, and I'm right and he's wrong, we're just perpetuating that negative cycle that actually doesn't enable us to find solutions.
I think there's a thing, again, for me, curiosity as a North Star is a really important element here, because there may well be something that somebody says that you think, wow, where did that come from? Right, you really weren't expecting it. To think, I wonder why they think that. That's not to say they must be right. I must be really bad at this thing, or I must not know how to do this. But let's say, for example, you think I'm an expert in this thing. You've been told by somebody that they think you make lots of mistakes, and you don't think that's true. To me, the curiosity of going, I wonder why it is that they think that.
Always, yeah.
Which then flips it from, no, I didn't, how dare they, to, that might not be true, but why do they think it's true? That then means that you can come at it and maybe ask more questions, try and understand more about where they got that impression from. That might highlight to you some things that you need to improve on, or it might highlight their lack of understanding. But it comes from a place of, why might that be happening? Not it is or is not the case.
Yeah, definitely. That's another really good technique to be able to take on board. And obviously, we're talking at the moment about negative feedback. But if we all see all feedback as an opportunity to learn and grow, then we don't perceive it as negatively. And then it becomes about, how do we receive positive feedback?
Yeah.
Because a lot of us, that compliment thing, where somebody says, oh, I like your jumper, and you go, oh, that's old thing, I've had it years. Instead of thank you. Something I learned to do a long time ago. Oh, thank you. That's nice. And to be able to receive positive feedback in a way that says, I'm going to give myself a pat on the back for that, because I'm really pleased that I've received this feedback. And I'm also going to really take that on board as something that I can develop even further and do even more often, because it's a positive thing and it's helping everybody.
Yeah, enabling you to say, I'm going to do more of that thing. And then if it's constructive, change this. Okay, consciously, I'm going to try and do that.
Yeah.
And it's such an interesting point, because we are negatively biased creatures. And I'm sure we've all experienced that. You can get 25 compliments and 1 insult, and you'll think about the insult.
Yeah.
So I'll give an example of this personally. So I do a lot of training, and last year I trained thousands of people, 2,000 odd people throughout the year. And every single training, people scan a QR code and they give feedback. And across the year, I got an average score of, I think, 9.7 out of 10
Nice.
for me as the coach and how I delivered it. So the content, they all asked different things, but for me as the coach, which is brilliant. However, I can tell you word for word the negative things that people said in that out of the thousands. I can't really remember a lot of the word for word good stuff that people said. There was one lady in a workshop once, there were 20 people in it, and 19 of them gave 5 out of 5 or 10 out of 10, whatever it was, full score. One of them gave 2 out of 5.
Oh,
And she said when she was asked what did she learn most in that session, she said patience, because she'd had to listen to me for however long.
oh.
Now, that hurt, and it was kind of funny in a way. I thought it was quite amusing the way that she'd said it. But of course, that happened maybe a year ago now, and I still remember that. But I couldn't tell you any of the 19 other people that
Yeah.
gave full scores and what they said. So part of it is recognizing that when we receive negative feedback, we are more likely for that to penetrate, which means we need to consciously choose to let the positive penetrate.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Allow that to come in just as much as the negative is, and
Yeah.
make that a conscious choice.
Yeah. Have you done that?
I try to. I definitely go through the positive ones. It's an interesting thing because you don't want to get cocky either, and
No.
therefore think everything I'm doing is great, I don't need to change. So there is a balance there of wanting that feedback. That in that case it wasn't constructive. There was nothing I could take from that. But let's say she'd said, I don't know, maybe I was too loud or talked too much or told too many stories or too much stats or whatever.
Yeah.
Then that's something I could have gone, okay, I can take that and learn from. And then the good stuff that people are saying that I'm doing, I'm going to take that and let that reinforce. So it's about seeing both sides as something valid to help me improve or stay good at whatever,
Yeah.
rather than allow it to take you either cockiness, arrogance, I'm so brilliant, or too negative. And I'm just going to think about all the horrible things that people say, or the not positive things that people say, and let that affect how I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree with that.
So that's getting feedback. Why is it a good thing for us to give feedback at work? We might not want to sometimes, it might feel uncomfortable, but why should we give feedback, especially upwards, which is where most people feel uncomfortable to do it?
I think that obviously it depends on the culture within the organisation, but generally speaking, if you are working in a growth business, actually a boss will welcome feedback of all sorts, whether it's a suggestion for something to be better or whether it's this is really good and I like this, could we do more of that in the business, could we, it showing that you don't just go to work to do your job. You are part of the organisation, you feel part of it, you feel that you've got something to contribute, and of course you want to be in an environment where that is well received.
Yeah, absolutely. The same applies, right? Giving good feedback as well as giving negative. That applies to leaders downwards, but it also applies upwards. So saying to a boss, for example, I really like the way that you mentor me in this, right? Or the way that you teach that, or I really love how flexible you are, or whatever it is, regularly. Again, not just we're in a one-to-one, I'm going to tell you a couple of things and I'm going to give you some negative feedback, but regularly. I really like this, I really like that, which probably means they're going to be more likely to take it from you if you say, I felt in this particular situation that this wasn't adhered to, or that wasn't particularly efficient, or that this made me feel this way. They're much more likely to take that because you're not the person that complains
All the time, yeah. 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 And I think having that thing of asking for feedback sessions, to say, I don't know, I've just dealt with this particular client and it was quite difficult. Could we sit and have a chat about it? Because I think maybe I could have done something better there. I'd like to know what you think. Or I want you to know this because I think it's really important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's that proactiveness, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And thinking about it, actually, reflect on this yourself, listener, that when was the last time you reached out to a colleague or a boss to thank them for something outside of the moment, or to give them a compliment outside of the moment? Because probably the more you do that, the more they're going to do it with you as well.
Absolutely.
There was somebody recently that I reached out to, a company that I've done some contract work with, and this girl was leaving, and often it's only then, and I realised that in the 2 years that I've been around that company and spoken with her, I've never said to her how great she was to work with, but I told it to her on her way out, because that's kind of what you do. Like, oh, you'll be missed and you're so great. And I was much more personal and specific than that. But I did think I probably should have said that to her, because she probably would have liked to hear it on a random Thursday. By the way, you're always so joyful, and I always love that you're smiley.
Yeah.
So more of that in the world wouldn't be a bad
more
thing.
Of that. Absolutely. Yeah. So, is there anything else that you can think of that would be useful for our listeners to think about when it comes to feedback?
So many things on how to give it that again, we could get into it deeply and it would take a very, very long time. But in a nutshell, as a quick tip thing, give feedback regularly. Ask people how they like to receive it. So you might have colleagues, you might maybe manage somebody, you might have a manager, but to, as early on in that relationship as possible, understand from them how they like to receive it. It might be a hypothetical. I was just listening to a podcast the other day on feedback, and they suggested this. Hypothetically, if I had feedback for you, either good or bad, how would you like to receive it? Would you want me to write it down? Would you want to speak about it? Would you want to be face to face? Would you want it in the moment or a day or two after? Because you might find that people have different preferences. And then it makes it easier for you to say, okay, I've got some feedback from my manager about the way they handled something. They told me they prefer written or spoken or whatever, so I'm going to do that. Which means you already know you're doing it in a way that's more likely to land well, because they've already told you that that's how it lands better for them. And then we talk about this a lot. Try and remove judgment from your language. So we often assume with our leaders that because they're in a position of leadership, they must therefore know how to manage or know how things might make people feel. But they're just a human. If somebody gave you, whoever you are, a job title change today with no extra training and no extra emotional intelligence, exploration, no extra strategy, with more pressure and maybe more hours and more expectation, you wouldn't just know what you need to do to manage people. You wouldn't understand that people might need something different from you. You're just going to do what you've always done. And that's what everybody does. I am so shocked by the amount of organisations that promote people to leadership and do not train them in how to be leaders. It's insane.
Yeah.
So having that mindset of, okay, my leader might have done something that I think is ridiculous, right? They've made a silly decision, or they don't explain things very well, or they're rude, or they're whatever. They probably don't know.
Yeah.
And they probably don't know otherwise. And they're probably under a lot of pressure. We all are, but the higher up you go tends to be, the more pressure you're under. And so it's letting that fuel the way you give feedback. It might be I was reflecting on our conversation the other day, and I understand that you probably did that for a reason. I couldn't understand what that was, and I wanted to come to you and ask what it was that led to that. Why it is that we've decided to do this as a company. Or it might be that you say, you definitely wouldn't have intended to do this. I know this wasn't in your intention. The other day when we were speaking, you said this, I did feel this way, which is very different than you did, you didn't, you are, you aren't.
Yeah.
It's I appreciate that there's your side to this and I'm sharing mine. And there's so many things in that, but is there anything else you would add in terms of giving or getting feedback that can help?
It comes down to the communication all the time, and just to sort of reiterate that awareness, being able to stop, to be able to look at it from the outside, to be able to feel able to communicate. And sometimes we don't, if we're in an organisation where it's not so easy to do that, then we have to find ways to deal with things, and that's probably a whole other topic. But it's about making those suggestions, having the strength of character, I suppose, and the mindset to be able to say, I'm willing to be the one that steps up and says, I'd like to talk about this, to see if there's a way we could change something that is not working, either for me or for the people around me as well.
Mm-hmm. I cannot tell you the amount of clients, friends, people that I've spoken to that will moan about things within their work or people within their work. Usually management, that's typically people's issue, is whoever manages them. And I'll say to them, out of curiosity, have you voiced that? And some people say yes, but 90% of the time people say, oh no. No one will know what's in your head unless you tell them.
No, exactly.
And so it's finding the way to do it. Use AI to your advantage there, right? Get out what you would say if you could say anything and let ChatGPT make it more landable.
Yeah.
But at least communicate it, because if we don't communicate and we're at a place for years, that compounds and compounds and compounds. And nobody knows that there's a problem until maybe you leave and you tell them, or somebody else leaves and they tell them. And by that point, we're already really deep into whatever that is that wasn't really working. So keep it regular, keep it in the right way. There's loads of ways to do that you could explore what that is. And ultimately, you'll end up working in a place that either becomes very obvious to you as not the place you want to be in. Fine, at least you know. Or you'll be able to improve it.
Yeah. So we'd like to just wrap up by telling you that we are very open to feedback. And if any of you would like to give us any feedback about our podcast or anything else, we'd be really happy to receive it, because we would like to grow and develop and to make things better. So whatever that might be, please feel free to share it. And we'll see you in the next episode.